Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be creating some easy backgrounds with brand new Distress Salvaged Patina products. We're going to be using the Distress ink, the Distress Oxide ink, and the Distress Embossing glaze for these 4 cards, featuring lots of products from the Simon Says Stamp Born to Sparkle release. Now we are going to start with just this basic piece of smooth white cardstock. This was a 110-pound weight Nina cardstock. We're also using a small brayer from Tim Holtz, and we're inking up the background with the Distress ink. This is not the oxide, but the regular ink. The benefit of using a brayer to apply the ink is you're getting this fantastic texture to the background. I really like the smaller brayer for this, as it kind of allows for a little bit more texture, I think, for the size of background, but you can really see the great design you get here. It's a very fantastic way to add ink quickly. On the right, that's an example of the oxide background. I know it's a little bit backwards, but I am going to be showing you how to create that here on camera as well. But that was the side-by-side comparison. We're going to do one of each. I'm inking up the brayer now with the Distress Oxide ink and applying it again to a 110-pound weight smooth white cardstock A2 sized panel. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I'm purposely just kind of going back and forth both vertically and horizontally to apply that ink to the background to get the most texture as possible. As this dries, it will smooth just a little bit. You can definitely see the Distress ink now on the right has dried. Let's go ahead and clean up our background and clean our brayer and move on to doing some of the finishing background details for these 2 backgrounds before we create our next 2. We are going to start with the Simon Says Stamp Painted Flowers stamp set. This is another new product from the Born to Sparkle release. I'm going to take all of the leaf images from the stamp set and place them in a misty. We're going to then apply Distress inks in Cracked Pistachio and Lucky Clover to create these really kind of two-tone type of leaf images. I am using the oxide inks, and I'm going to ink them a couple times. I'm placing them in the misty so that I'm able to easily do this and get the coverage I want for these images. Now what we're going to do is create all over backgrounds. It's one of my favorite techniques, and it's something that I do a lot. I think it's really eye-catching and fun, and the subtle backgrounds that we achieved with the brayer are going to be the perfect backdrop to these minty green leaves and then yellow flowers that we're going to stamp next. I wanted everything to be very springy and just colorful and fun. You can definitely see using the misty allows you to easily be able to get the coverage you want. I've had a lot of people ask what I've been using to press the cover of the Misty. My friend Susan actually gave me this hockey puck that she had ordered. She had ordered, I think, a set of several, and she gave me one to try when we were together stamping and I didn't have anything for my Misty cover with me. And it's a very inexpensive, easy way to press down on the cover of your Misty. I will link to that in the supplies if you're interested in picking this up for yourself, because it really does save your hands. I will also be linking, pardon me, to the Stamper's Secret tool that you have probably seen me use in other videos as well. I'm inking up the flower images from Painted Flowers with several shades of Distress Oxide ink. We've got Squeezed Lemonade, Mustard Seed, and Fossilized Amber for kind of a 3-tone type of look. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this again. I even stamped a couple of extra off camera to make sure that I had enough to fill in all the space. That's going to go for some of the greenery as well. I actually think maybe I just stamped more greenery and not any more yellow. Maybe a couple more things of yellow. Once you get all of these die cut, it definitely gives you a little bit better idea of what you might be needing still to fill in your background so that it looks like this custom, almost pattern paper looking background. You could also do this in several different colors if you'd like, instead of doing more of that monochromatic look that I did. So all my flowers are yellow, but you could definitely do lots of different colors if you wanted. I have now die cut all of my image. You can see I have a few extra here over on the left, and I'm going to start assembling, which simply is gluing everything down in place. I am going to be adding leaves and flowers all over the Distress Oxide Salvaged Patina background. I lay everything out first and then I glue it all down as I go. So you'll notice that things are not glued down until I pick them up. I'm trying to be kind of careful and pick them up one by one. If I had pre-planned my sentiment a little bit more, I probably could have avoided putting some of the images down right through the center. I really didn't plan out my sentiments until the end. I basically did 4 backgrounds, and then I went, found a sentiment stamp set I wanted to use, found some sentiment strips, and finished the cards that way, really pretty simply. But if you're pre-planning, you can kind of avoid this section if you want to do something similar like I did, like the tulip looking flower and then the little dots. You could probably just not put any of those right there since they're going to be covered up. Now, same thing, if you want to use a much simpler and smaller sentiment, that won't be impacted as much, but I use kind of some bigger sentiments here. You'll also notice that a lot of the images are hanging off the sides of my background, and that is very much on purpose. It looks more complete if some of the things are hanging off the side. What we'll do is flip the panel over and trim away that excess. I like to save it because some of those little bits and pieces might be useful to tuck in to some empty spots along the edges of the card design. I'm going to be doing that with like this little piece of greenery. I'm not sure if I used a whole lot of others on this particular background, but it works so great. We're going to set that background aside and work on our next background that features the brand new Organic Fruits stamp set. We're going to stamp the orange shapes. I'm using them as oranges for my card. They're very graphic in nature. And I'm going to be using Simon Says Stamp inks in Orange Slush, Clementine, and Melon. So just 3 different shades of orange for my oranges, and I'm also using the small and large size, and then we will be doing much like we did on the last card where we're creating this all over background. Using the MISTI allows me to stamp things more than once to get that coverage that we want. You'll notice that I am leaving the stamps in place and simply flipping the cardstock in my MISTI or using another sheet. And this allows me to stamp multiples of these very quickly. The ink looks very wet and very saturated right now, but this is a dye ink. As the ink dries, it is going to even out, smooth out, and fade just a little bit. I'm going to clean those solid stamps, put those back on the backing sheet, and now I'm going to take the outline and ink this up with a black ink on each of these. Because I have kept them in the same place, it's very easy to do those quickly. We've got 6 of those. Again, we're going to clean the outline stamp now. And to make it very simple, I'm actually just going to take my black ink pad and I'm going to use an acrylic block to add the detail to each of the oranges instead of having to move that image. Then we can go ahead and grab our leaf images from the Organic Fruits stamp set, and we are going to this time stamp the outlines first. That's going to make it just a little bit easier for that grouping of leaves. You could do it either way for the individual leaves, but I'm going to stamp a lot of these. I think I ended up maybe not using 2 leaves out of all of them that I'm going to stamp here. I'm doing the same kind of technique as before, where I am placing the stamps in the MISTI, stamping them on my cardstock in the same position. I'm not moving the stamps, I'm just moving my paper. This gives me 3 sets of leaves, and then after I have all the outlines, I am going to take the solid images and stamp those with a combination of Simon Says Stamp, Catkin, and Green Apple inks. That's going to give me 2-tone leaves. That is not 2 steps of stamping. That's stamping with Catkin first, inking, then inking up a portion of those stamps with Green Apple and stamping it on top. And we're going to do this for all of our leaves. Then we're going to take all of the coordinating dies and die cut all the pieces. Also included in the Organic Fruit set, there are some pears, apples, and there's even some sentiments. I'm actually going to use sentiments from a different stamp set, but the sentiments from this are really beautiful as well. You could even mix and match your fruits and not do all oranges if you didn't want to. Once I have all of my images die cut, we're going to kind of lay them out on the Salvaged Patina Distress Ink background. This is the Distress Ink, not the Distress Oxide. I find with this brayer technique, your oxide ink is going to give you a little bit lighter background. The Distress Ink. The oxide is going to give you a little bit darker, more saturated background. That's the same going to go for our next backgrounds, which we will do with an embossing folder, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now we're just going to go and glue everything down in place, just filling in all those little nooks and crannies. I love how the brayer background gives you that great texture. So it's not as smooth as a blending tool would give you. You're going to see some of those brayer kind of marks where it's lighter in the background. I know we're covering up a lot of it, but I really love this for creating custom color backgrounds with lots of texture. Don't forget, anything hanging off of the edge of this background can then be used to fill in extra areas. So I have 6 oranges total, but it's going to look like more on the finished panel because I'm going to fill in with some of these little bits and pieces that I'll trim off the edges. Same goes for some of the leaves. Now I'm just trimming off all of those little excess, and then you'll see me fill in with some of those extra orange pieces. I love the combination of orange colors against the Salvaged Patina background. Part of the reason I went with the oranges is because I really love the yellow against this. Same as the flowers from the first card, I liked yellow with the Salvaged Patina as well. Next, the next easy background we're going to create is one of my favorite techniques, and that is applying ink to an embossing folder and embossing the image on some cardstock. And it's going to allow that background to have color, and then we're going to watercolor the embossed images. We're going to do this with 2 of the new embossing folders from Simon Says Stamp, starting with the Magnolia Branches embossing folder. I'm using the larger Tim Holtz brayer to grab that ink. I'm using the Distress Oxide Salvaged Patina ink first, and then we're going to roll that on to the embossing folder. In the past, I've taken the ink and just applied it directly to the embossing folder, I have to say you get much more even, beautiful coverage with the brayer. I highly, highly recommend it. Look at that beautiful background. Let's go ahead and do the same thing, this time with the SEEDHEAD stems embossing folder, but with distress ink instead of oxide. I know you can't see the ink very well on camera right now, but I promise it is transferring on here. It's just got a little bit different property, of course, to it, and the brayer applies it beautifully. I am using watercolor cardstock for these because I'm going to watercolor the embossed images, and I found that I really liked the finished look of it better with watercolor cardstock, as well as it's easier to watercolor. So here is the background with distress ink. You can see those beautiful SEEDHEAD stems there on the background. To watercolor this first background, I know this is called Magnolia, but I colored mine with like some shades of purple. This is some Moon Rock Altenew watercolor. I was looking for a color that I thought would look really beautiful against this, and I loved this. So I'm taking a paintbrush, I'm dipping it in water, and then using these Altenew watercolors. Again, this color is Moon Rock. I have listed the watercolor names across the top of the screen for easy reference. You'll notice I'm doing the light layer of ink first. And I'm going to let that dry and apply the light layer of green ink then to the leaves and branches with frayed leaf. Just making sure to pick up water. I'm not using a lot of water. In fact, I am kind of trying to remove most of that water before I lay the color down. I want it to stay mostly on the raised part of the image and not migrate anywhere else. The great thing about using an ink to ink up the embossing folder before you emboss the image is that it colors the background instantly. And I really, really love how that looks because it makes the embossing pop. We're going to keep applying the frayed leaf color before we move on to adding the next layer color on top of the flowers. I kept it pretty simple, as I've done with most, or the other two cards, I guess, here today. And I've kind of just kept it to a certain color combination. We're going to be layering on a deeper color of blue on top of that light Moon Rock purple color. I kind of call it a lilac color, but then we're going to layer on the darker color on top. You can see I've already done one up there in the upper corner. I kind of did one just to make sure I liked it, and that before I went ahead and did all of the rest. So next we're just going to go in and add some Persian blue. We'll also be adding forest glades to the leaves to give them texture. Again, you can see the one that I already finished in the upper left corner. And this just takes a little maybe time and practice. I am not super great with my watercolor, but this was definitely a great practice for me, and I ended up really, really loving the background. I think it's super pretty, and it just is a fun new way, or not new necessarily, but a fun way to add color to the background. A little bit of watercolor. You could definitely do this with any kind of colors. You could even use distress inks or distress oxide inks and a paintbrush and water if you wanted to. If you don't have watercolors, I've actually had this watercolor pan palette for quite a while, maybe 2 or 3 years. Gosh, and I hardly use it because I feel like I'm not that great with it, and I'm trying to make an effort to work with it a little bit more because I really, really love it. I will admit that not this background, but I did try a different embossing folder, not one of them in this video. And I painted it and I absolutely did not like it and I threw it away. So there are going to be hits and misses, but this one was a joy to watercolor. This is definitely a little bit more involved. The next one is going to be way more simple. There's not near as much coloring on it, just to give you a little idea of, you know, what it looks like with a couple of different ones. I got a little bit of green into the flower down there. Kind of, my hand is covering it now, but I just dabbed it up and let it dry. And when I layer the blue on top, I don't think we're going to be able to see it. We're just gonna blend, blend, blend. And I want to make sure and get all of these. This was probably the most time-consuming card I did, just because of all of the watercolor, but I definitely think it might be one of my favorites because I just love the color combination. I kind of like that blue violet against the Salvaged Patina background and then all the green. Really, really pretty. And for all of you who I know have heard me say that I don't do purple, apparently I do purple. I'm not going to say that anymore because I really like this. I think the color combination works very nicely. If you don't have these watercolors and maybe you have the distress inks, you can press them on an acrylic block, or if you have the glass work surface, you can do that as well. You can pick it up with your paintbrush and paint with it. Colors that would be similar in distress inks are going to be Shaded Lilac and Blueprint Sketch. I think you could get very, very similar results with those two colors. You can layer on as much as you want. I know I mentioned I used watercolor cardstock. This is the Arches Cold Press watercolor cardstock that I'm using today. All of my backgrounds are A2 size today. I did not cut any of them down. I really wanted to feature an entire card background, so they measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. As more and more of the color gets added here, I think you can definitely see just how pretty and how detailed this embossing folder is. Simon Says Stamp has some incredible embossing folders. They are amazing. I highly recommend them. I will link to another video at the end of this one where I have used some fun techniques with the embossing folders. They were a lot more seasonal, like Christmas and fall and things, but definitely check that out if you want some other ideas on what to do with embossing folders. Laying just a little bit of water down now first. As I did this more, I found myself getting a little bit more comfortable. I really like to lay the water down and then just kind of add a little bit of color and then blend out. We are getting close to the end. We have a little bit more greenery and things, but definitely the most time-consuming part of this project, or these projects. For the leaves, I kind of did a vein down the center, and then making sure not to have a ton of water in my paintbrush, I would kind of draw in some little veins coming from the center so that they have more texture. So picking up just a little bit of paint with the tip of my paintbrush and not blending it out a lot. Do these right here. For the centers, I used a little fresh lemon and warm sunshine, and I did more of a little dabbing motion rather than painting it all the way in. Then we're going to go ahead and let this completely dry. Yes, I forgot to add the Persian blue to that little bud over on the right side, but I will do that off camera before I finish the card. Here is the awesome little seedless, or I probably said it wrong. Let me get the exact name again. SEEDHEAD stems. And I'm going to do the leaves first. I really like these. Again, frayed leaf and forest glades are going to be the two colors here, but we're going to do the layer of frayed leaf first. Now, because these, I know they're called SEEDHEAD stems, but I'm thinking they're dandelions. I want them to be a lot of white, but I feel like they need a little color to them because there's going to be color down at the bottom. That's where our sentiments are going to go, and I really feel like there needs to be a little something. So I'm going to add some yellow to these, kind of more concentrated in the center. Then I'm going to add quite a bit of water and blend that out. Not really doing completely to the outer edges. And I'm going to end up adding quite a lot of water to this and blending to just give that little bit of illusion of color. And I'm not being super, I guess, detailed there. It's more just adding in that color. For the stem, we're going to do a little Mocha. So pulling in a different color. And I got a little messy here. If you tend to get messy, you can clean your paintbrush really well, get it full of water, and then pick up some of that paint and clean it away. You can see as the yellow of the SEEDHEAD stems dries, it's going to fade a little bit, and then I'm going to take the warm sunshine and dot that in the center. Then just like before, we're going to take forest glades and draw in the detail on our leaves to give them lots of great texture. While this is drying, then we are going to go ahead and stamp and emboss some sentiments for all 4 cards. So I mentioned a little bit ago that I didn't really plan out my sentiments. I did the backgrounds and then I went and found a stamp set that I wanted to use. In this case, we are going to be using the XL Greetings 2 stamp set for all of our stamped and embossed sentiments. And I really wanted a tone on tone so that my embossing powder matched my backgrounds perfectly. So we're going to be using Salvaged Patina Distress Embossing Glaze for our sentiments, and I love how this embosses. If you don't get as deep and dark of embossing as you want the first pass, which you're going to see here, you can definitely emboss it again and again if you need to, and if you use a MISTI. I know I'm showing this big friend sentiment. I actually ended up not using it. It just really didn't work for the card. I'm going to switch it out for I love you instead. Friend is just too big. It's going to cover up too much of the background, and I don't want to cover that much of it up. But this does give you a good idea of what it looks like if maybe you don't get a great embossed background with the first pass. So I am prepping my cardstock. I am using smooth white cardstock. I'm prepping it with a powder tool and then inking up the sentiments with a clear embossing ink. I am using something to press on the cover, but I am going to ink them up twice because they do have a pretty big surface area on these particular sentiments. And then I am going to sprinkle on our Salvaged Patina Distress Embossing Glaze. Let's open up our package here. I hadn't even opened it yet. And it is just beautiful, you guys. I really, really love this color. I am so excited about this. So we're sprinkling that on. I'm just going to use this paper from my mini MISTI. And you'll notice that there is a big section, especially like in Friend, that did not get a great coverage. And even though the other sentiments really did have complete coverage, I liked stamping and embossing them twice. I just think it gives it a little bit more of a substantial outline look. So I ended up stamping everything twice and embossing it. But before I stamp it again, I do need to heat it up. I let my embossing gun heat for probably a minute before I bring it to my paper, and then I want to keep it moving, and I want to use it on both the front and the back of my cardstock to prevent as much warping as possible, especially because I already know that I need to put it back in my MISTI, and I don't want that slight warping to kind of hinder how this is going to stamp. So let's go ahead and place that right back in the MISTI. Let's ink up our sentiments. Keep in mind, I'm not showing the just a card to say you're amazing and the I love you. Those I did off camera, but they were created exactly the same way with the same stamp set and the same embossing powder or the embossing glaze. I'm a huge fan of different colors of embossing powders, and this is a really good one. I think it shows up very, very nicely, and it's a nice alternative. In fact, there's still a couple of areas that I just don't think, or maybe I didn't re-stamp the sending lots of hugs, so I am going to go ahead and do that one again. And that next layer just provides a little bit more of a substantial outline. Now there are coordinating dies for the sentiments in this XL Greetings 2 stamp set, which I totally love. I think that's phenomenal. And it's going to give us a great little outline, and I'm going to pop these up with foam adhesive right on our backgrounds, which I love a sentiment that pops up off the background, especially if it's a busy background. And all of these backgrounds tend to have kind of a lot going on with the all over patterns that we have adhered. We're going to take some foam adhesive squares and place them on the back and pop up the stamped and embossed sentiments. And then I already have some reverse encouraging words sentiment strips trimmed down and ready to go. We're going to use these with our stamped and embossed sentiments on each card. So this is just a card to say you're amazing, you are doing great. A nice little encouragement style card. We have sending happy thoughts, and underneath we're going to have when I can hug you again, you're in for a major squeeze. Yes, I picked this particular phrase because of the squeeze and the oranges. I thought that was a cute little play on words and really went together so nicely. Let's get that lined up. Love that background. I love, love, love the orange against the Salvaged Patina. Then we have sending lots of hugs. No one is you, and that is your superpower. I have used this on another card, and I totally love that little sentiment strip. So amazing. We're using some little foam adhesive strips for our sentiment strips. And then the SEEDHEAD stems, this is a unique one. It's not an all over pattern like the others. So I used a little bit smaller phrase, the I love you, and then the sentiment strip is we can always hug it out. I think that's so cute as well. You could even just use that and not add anything else, and it would be beautiful. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these Salvaged Patina Distress Easy backgrounds using the Salvaged Patina Distress ink, Distress Oxide ink, and embossing glaze. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here is another video showing some embossing folder techniques and Simon Says stamp products that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.